Welcome everyone! Woohoo!
Woo! Hi!
Episode week number 5 here on the Port Haven StreamCast. I am your boy, Professor Django, and as always, I am here with my good pal.
I'm Yoda Bauer. It's great reading what all of you have to say.
Yep, you in fact can see us, at least hopefully. If not, something has gone wrong. But you can see us, and we can see you. This is how we see you. This is what you are to me at the moment. But we are glad that you are here with us again for another week. We have a lot of fun doing these streamcasts, and we hope that you do too.
Yeah, this is definitely a highlight of my week. Although I was telling Django before, a lot of times I feel like we're just having the conversations we'd have if we weren't live.
Yeah, you don't get to see this because, I mean, hopefully you're not watching us all the time. But
Right.
but yeah, we basically just talk Star Wars. I mean, like we want to talk about Rebels some today, but like we watched the Rebels episodes together and we've
Yep.
discussed them since, and then we made videos, and now here we are
Yep.
again. So
To do more.
so this is how I do Star Wars these days. So
Yep.
um,
But yeah, on that note, Rebels continues to be crazy. We are going to talk about Rebels, and we're going to talk about some spoilers that happened in the last 2 episodes, which is Wolves and a Door and a world between worlds. If you haven't seen them, I recommend you be careful because we're going to talk about a lot of crazy stuff. But yeah. I mean, a lot of the crazy stuff we've done videos on.
I mean, honestly, if you haven't seen them right now, like, I want you to watch the streamcast, but I would rather you watch Rebels. So, like, we have a pause button, and then you can go and watch them, and then you can just pretend that we're live when you come back.
Yes. Nolan in chat is correct. I did have a fit. I had a fit.
I was there for it. But no, so Rebels was crazy this week, and we want to talk about it. After the week before, I didn't know that it could be more emotional,
Right.
but it was, and so I don't know what that means for next week. But
Right.
but yeah, we're gonna be talking about some of this stuff. So make sure that either one, you have seen it, or two, you don't want to see it, because
Right.
that's what we're getting into today. We also want to do some solo stuff later and talk about a few other things that tie in.
Right.
But that's kind of our agenda for today. So where do you want to jump in with some Rebels stuff from these 2 episodes?
Man, well, I think you were talking about how it couldn't be more emotional. So 2 weeks ago, or week and a half ago, when we last call on jump out now for spoilers, but we saw Kanan's passing, and I wasn't sure I could react to that more. But then to see his passing again, and to
Right.
see Ezra go through like the potentiality of stopping it, but then realizing that he shouldn't toy with time,
Right.
that I think I was more emotional and closer to tears
Right.
than when it happened the first time.
Well, and it would be so easy, and this is one thing I'm glad they didn't do. Because one of the easiest, and from like a story writing plot standpoint, at least in my mind, one of the easiest things to do when you have time travel is to like immediately create a paradox and then have your characters like have to sort through that paradox. And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, as much as I didn't want Kanan to still be dead, like I liked that they intentionally didn't do that. Like, the lesson was you have to let go, because that's always what the lesson in Star
Mm-hmm.
Wars has been about moments of loss, is that you know Yoda says we don't mourn them, we let them go because they're part of the cosmic force now, whether they're Jedi or not.
Right.
um and so to like have that moment where Ezra and Ahsoka specifically don't save Kanan, to
Mm-hmm.
avoid that like moment where, oh well, because we didn't save Kanan, then Kanan didn't die, but because Kanan didn't die, then I didn't come in here and I didn't save him, and then if I didn't save him, then he died, and so like you end up in this sort of circular
Right.
thing, which is just the go to for a lot of time travel-y kind of plots, and Star Wars has never been much for that. And so I'm glad that they did it, but only kind of dipped their toe in a little bit. But
it's funny though you mentioned that, because Ezra did save Ahsoka,
sure,
arguably.
yeah,
So she exists, but then she goes back. But she goes back after the explosion that should have killed her
right,
goes off. And so I'm really curious about what's going to happen there. And I mentioned this in one of the Rebels videos too. Is when she walks back through the door at the end of Twilight of the Apprentice, which I believe was season 2.
right.
It's a triangle like door, so I'm kind of wondering if she like goes back or not.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, I should have mentioned this to you in our prep, and I didn't think about it till just now. But as longtime viewers would know, we're both big fans of Star Wars Card Trader. Did you ever get into the Filoni drawing fan series of Ahsoka?
I've got them all.
Have you? Did you go back and look at them? Because I went back and looked at this particular one. I don't know if you can see it.
No.
Yeah, right. I noticed that last night and I was freaking out. So that's Ahsoka going through a circle portal, which is what Ezra pulls her through, and the wolf doors are there.
No, and that's cool.
I was like, dang it, Dave Filoni, you little jerk. You've been planning this the whole time.
Well, and I feel like, you and I talked about this too, that the ending of Rebels in a big way is also the ending of Clone Wars. Because we never got an opportunity to like bring it to any type of like real conclusion, and so I love that there are these things, whether they're intentional or retconned or whatever you want to think about it, that there are these things that are being worked in that kind of long term way. Even just the idea that Ezra and Yoda talking at the Jedi Temple earlier in Rebels was the same thing. To me was really, really meaningful and valuable, just as a viewer. And again, it ties in all different sorts of emotions. And then again, just the notion that, in Rebels Recon, which is the Star Wars official YouTube channel series that they do every week about Rebels, Dave Filoni was talking about how, he wanted to emphasize this thing where, all of Star Wars ties in together. And so while they're there, you hear dialogue from all of the films, or at least all of the characters from different films, to make sure that every different thing is represented. And I really loved that idea too.
Yeah, I've been excited with this whole concept of Mortis coming back from the Clone Wars, because the Mortis trilogy is so weird in the Clone Wars, and not just because it's the trippy content, but it's this trilogy of episodes that just really got down to brass tacks about what the Force is and what the Chosen One prophecy is, and all of these big things that Jedi files like myself have been really into.
Right.
And then it's done. And we had 3 22-minute episodes, and we're good. We don't need to address it anymore. And it never really came up in the series. Like the Yoda episodes briefly talk about it. Oh, real quick, say hi to some people. I see McYagi there, and hello. And I also want to say hi to Mr. Beeman Entertainment, because I know you're a Rebels fan. If you haven't watched Rebels, you should be careful, because we are talking a little bit about it. And I just want to forewarn you. I don't know if you got caught up this week. But right now we're still talking about stuff you'd seen in the trailer. But so, in the Clone Wars, they talk about Mortis and all of this stuff and all these big concepts.
Right.
But then they just drop it, and they kind of mention it a little bit here and there. But it was such a big thing, and I have to think that they had plans of going back to Mortis and addressing it again, and then they never got around to it. And to see them get pulled into Rebels, which is so crazy, because I wouldn't expect a show about the rebellion to get into what is the nature of the Force. Sure. But yeah, no, that's been really exciting for me.
Well, and I feel like it ties into that Yoda arc in the last series of the Clone Wars too. where Yoda is there with the wheels, and um,
Hmm.
and learns about how to maintain consciousness after death and connects with Qui-Gon. And
Hmm.
um, I don't know. I just love how it all ties together. Even just like the subtle thing of getting confirmation that Ahsoka isn't dead. Like even if we don't see her on
Right.
Monday, like
Yeah.
just to know that. I mean, because I don't. Maybe she's still hanging out on Malachor. I mean, she can't fly through space without a ship, so
Right.
maybe she's just hanging out there. But um, just that confirmation, even from Filoni, just makes it this sort of through line through everything. Right from that Clone Wars movie through the series into Rebels, all the way now through Rebels.
Right.
And several books. You got the Ahsoka novel and A New Dawn. It just brings it all together in a way, and really sort of sets it up for whatever might come in the future too.
And I would love to see, like, there has to be consequences of what happened with Ahsoka.
Sure.
There has to be. And I feel like that could be something she's been facing in this time between when she goes back through the portal and when she would eventually show up in hypothetically next week.
Right.
But yeah.
And I mean, so I've seen parts of the trailers. So there was a really short trailer that ran with the Rebels Recon, and they've posted another thing that ran itself,
Hmm.
and then with the Star Wars show yesterday on YouTube. And it does look like they're moving kind of. I mean, I don't want to be spoilery about it because I know you don't like trailers, but I honestly don't know what they're going to show or what's going to be included. And I don't get the sense that we're going to get another really deep Force moment. But I do think we could very much see consequences to what happened. Um,
Right.
because even like I wonder what that looks like from Darth Vader's perspective. Because like you asked me yesterday or since someday since
Yeah.
Tuesday when we watched it, if I thought Vader, like when Obi-Wan disappears, if he's assuming it's the same type of thing.
Yeah, right.
Um, because
Not this again.
Ahsoka just disappeared on him, and I would love
Yeah.
to see in something, um, what that looks like from his perspective, because he's about to kill her, and then all of a sudden she's just gone,
Right.
um, and then if he ever finds out again that she's still alive, um, to get that kind of confirmation,
Yeah.
but
And I could see something where Ahsoka could show up
sure,
on Monday.
yeah,
And then we just don't really address it. Because, I mean, what's Ezra going to do? Well, I found her in this space place where there was an owl and I could hear some voices. Like, he's not really going to talk about it.
right.
So
I almost
I think
died to the Emperor.
right. He was there, but he wasn't.
Yeah.
He was just looking through a window in space time and found me there. And it's so crazy to actually be talking about Star Wars because Star Wars went a long time before
Right.
doing like actual time travel. And I'm not sure it really has done actual time travel right
Right.
now.
I mean, well, even if you think about it, like Ahsoka's time travel moment was like a 15-minute jump into the future from her perspective.
Right.
Like, it's time travel, but it's not Ezra going back to change the past. It's not jumping into the future to do something. So like it gives us this idea that all of these things are connected in the Force without having to make it this big type of interference that has to be explained. I mean, and even like the idea that Palpatine wants this control, like that makes sense, but it also
Right.
that becomes then the explanation for why you can't do this. Um,
Right.
so it's like it's a built-in type of thing.
And yeah, and there's so much I want to know about what happened. And one of my other videos that I posted after this was, of course, I now have this new theory that this kind of time and space place that they went to
Yeah.
is how Snoke was able to make Kylo and Rey talk to each other.
Sure.
Right? So it's like there's basically my understanding of what happened is the world between worlds is like this place. It's kind of like I can't remember which Matrix sequel it is, but it's like the Matrix where you like go out the dojo door and it's just like this series of hallways and you can just like open like these like really generic doors and you end up in other places.
That was the second one.
Yeah, okay.
The Matrix
and it's
Reloaded.
and it's like that, but in the Force. You know, you go into this big void and there's these doors and you can kind of like go through them and find these different important parts. And what really got me thinking about this theory was in the Rebels Recon episode, they talked about how Ezra has been here before, that this is where he talked to Yoda in season 1, I think it was. And that Ezra couldn't perceive all of what was around him because he was too naive. He didn't understand what was going on, which is why when he's there later, he can see more of it. And it makes me think that, you know, if we have Ezra there 50 years from now, imagine what that space could look like if he can only perceive so much based off of what he knows. But Kylo and Rey could be seeing each other through that space, but if they have no knowledge of that space, they could not perceive it.
Well, it makes me wonder what it looked like from Yoda's perspective too.
Right.
You know, because even Filoni says that, you know, Ezra didn't know what he was doing because he didn't really have experience with it. He was too much of a novice for that. But Yoda obviously wouldn't be. You know, he may not have specific experience with this type of thing before, but he would have more Force knowledge. I mean, maybe he does have specific knowledge of this type of thing before. You know, he's been around for millennia. So, you know, who's to say that somewhere he hasn't come across this type of knowledge? You know, but it's interesting to me, and I wonder what it looks like from Yoda's perspective. I really wanted the camera to pan out so that we could see what it looked like from Palpatine's perspective.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we get that glimpse of Palpatine. You know, he's reaching through. You know, even at one point, like he gets like part of his hand through, and he's and I don't think he knew how to enter, but I think he was trying to pull Ezra through. But I want to see like where he was doing that, you know, and what was going on from his end of that and his point of view as well.
You know, talking about how this connects to something like The Last Jedi kind of goes into the other kind of spin on Rebels I was hoping we'd get to in this, which is Rebels has been such a connection between the films, the books, even Legends, and this scene that scene in The World Between Worlds was really, to me, like how it's like the crowning achievement of that, right? Like Rebels just kind of takes all of Star Wars and puts it in this giant bowl.
Yeah.
And that's been so fun for me, especially coming off of the Clone Wars, because the Clone Wars, it had a bad rap because it was kind of undoing canon, right? And ironically, it became this great nature preserve for canon. But for me, in so many ways, for that series, I felt like Clone Wars was about, okay, we have all of this Star Wars, we have all of these books, we have all of these movies. What weird stuff can we do now? Like, what kind of crazy adventures haven't we gone on? Or what nitty gritty details haven't we gone on? So, like, you know, big scope things like Mortis, and then you have small scale things like, one of the worst episodes, Senate Murders, where you like follow around that detective and he's trying to figure out who poisoned Uncle Anno or something. But I mean, just kind of like all these different avenues. They had Godzilla episodes, they had Brain Invader episodes. Like, they just explored everything. Where Rebels isn't doing that because Rebels understands that there's a clean slate now. And so it's taking this clean slate and giving key points of reference of like, pull a little bit of this and pull a little bit of that.
Sure.
I've really appreciated that.
Yeah, I have too. So let's one of the other things we wanted to talk about is, we're very aware that Rebels is ending, um, literal days from now,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we can talk about what we expect that will look like. Although I would, we're going to talk about it next week either way. Once we know what it
Right.
looks like.
Right. Yeah.
Um, but we also saw a little piece. I forget which was the original um, article, the interview that Dave Filoni had done, where this was mentioned. But I feel like he's mentioned it in a couple places too.
Mm-hmm.
In his kind of coy Dave Filoni kind of way,
Mm-hmm.
mentioned that there is going to be something else, that he's not done with Star Wars, he's not done with Lucasfilm,
Right.
he's not done with animated shows, and we don't have any type of confirmation of that. But I like this idea too, that this story isn't done. So
Right.
we still, we got the glimpses of Mortis, or the 3 episodes of Mortis in the Clone Wars, and we get a little bit
Mm-hmm.
more of it in Rebels. Then maybe we get a little bit more in whatever comes next, or these through lines, or these threads get picked up on in whatever comes next, and it becomes this much larger kind of Star Wars tapestry, which is one reason why I don't understand why more people aren't into the animated shows.
Right.
Maybe it's just a medium thing for them, but I'm looking forward to whatever comes next. Also,
Yeah. I am really excited. So yeah, Filoni's supposed to be announcing a new project, which is presumably going to be an animated project. Uh, and I'm excited to see what this third series is. And part of me wants, we had Clone Wars, and then we had the Rebellion pre A New Hope, and it would be fun to see a Rebellion, post A New Hope, or like try to continue on. But I also wouldn't be against. I think there's a pretty strong rumor that the next animated series would be sequel trilogy
right,
time. With Disney has bought the name Star Wars Resistance for something. It's been copyrighted,
right,
and that could be a game, it could be a comic series, it could be anything, but it's just happened at the same time as Filoni saying he has another series coming.
sure,
And I think, by the time because they were just recently working on Rebels, by the time they can get an animated show off the ground, uh, it'll be around the time that episode 9 would have aired,
right.
right?
So
We're not going to see this soon. So I feel like I've been saying for a while that we're going to get way more sequel trilogy era content, and especially content that takes place between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens
right.
once episode 9 is out.
Yeah, I mean, because then you don't have the kind of constraints of not wanting to overstep the films. Because as much as I
Right.
like, the novels and the TV shows, the films are
Yeah.
always going to be, even though we don't have G level canon and like all these different
Right.
understandings
All
of
that good stuff.
anymore. The films are still preeminent, over everything else.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to overstep that, but yeah, I would love to see, especially where I would like to see is even in that transition from Republic to Resistance, in that
Right.
type of bloodline
Yep.
part of the time frames, even like before the Force Awakens, that like early Resistance kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, we get some of that already in like the Poe graphic, or not graphic novel, but the Poe comics,
Yep.
and things like that. So I mean, it's there, but I would
Hmm.
really love more of that if I were to pick something
Yeah.
specific. And I feel like that's kind of the more natural place to go with it.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm just, it wouldn't tie in with the title Resistance too much because it's too close to after Return of the Jedi. But I'm just needing to know more about the characters from the Aftermath trilogy. Like
sure.
I finally own the Aftermath trilogy now. I'm going to be rereading it, and I'm so excited to know more about those guys.
Hmm.
And I think we could get there as well. So I'm excited to see where we go from here. Part of me is kind of sad with episode 9 coming because I know everyone's sick of the Skywalker saga and we want these like other stories. I've always wanted other stories on top of the Skywalker stories. Like
Right.
I don't know that I'm ready for the end of the Skywalker saga, even though I'm excited for this other stuff. I do want a break. Like, I'd be totally fine with a 10-year break before we continue to start the Skywalker saga. But
Yeah.
I'm really excited for another series, and another series that's going to be set in a wildly different part of the timeline.
Right.
And we can go back to, our fun episode commentaries,
Well,
hopefully.
and one thing about the Resistance, if it was a Resistance show that we get next, it would be very hard not to have Leia feature prominently
Oh, yeah.
in that. So, I mean, there's still going to be tie-ins. You might even get a young Ben Solo, or I guess
Right.
not young at the time of the Resistance because he's already off with Luke at the time.
Right.
But like, there's room for that there.
Right.
Um, and again, I think it's what we're most likely to get. My big thing though is, I really, as much as I want something to come next, and I feel like there is going to be something that comes next, I
Mm-hmm.
really want. I mean, if we get to the middle of next week and it happens next week, I'm not going to complain about it. But I would really
Right.
like some time to let Rebels be Rebels even after it's over, and have a minute
Mm-hmm.
to think about it and sort of soak it in before we get a big announcement of something else. Um, and I don't know if that will happen, but that would be kind of what I would want.
I agree, and I don't like. I think for me, if say Star Wars Resistance got announced, it would be enough for me that it's so far after Rebels. I would still be able to kind of mourn not having Rebels, because because the likelihood that anybody from Rebels being a major character
Right.
is going to be very slim. Um, I think I don't know, I'm where I'm at with Star Wars is, it's for me, yes, the movies are obviously the most important thing, and we should preserve the storytelling so that the filmmakers are not encumbered. But Star Wars is just this giant blob to me.
Right.
So even though Rebels is ending and I'm so sad about losing Rebels, it doesn't feel like Star Wars is ending. So I'm like, okay, well, Rebels is going to be done. But then I'll have Solo, and then I'll have Episode 9, and then I'll have, this book or that comic, and I can kind of like keep pulling myself forward.
Right.
Or I remember when shows like two of my, I'd say probably my top 3 shows of all time that I followed all the way through, and then I like own all of, are 24, Fringe, and Monk. And I remember
Mm-hmm.
very clearly when those shows ended, and I was so depressed.
Right.
But they didn't feed into this larger thing, so it didn't. This doesn't feel like quite the same to me.
Right. Well, and I like that too, and I do like that sense that there is a larger thing that it all plays a part of, and I guess as long as there was distance from it, it would be fine. I
Mm-hmm.
guess I just one thing I really want out of next week is I need some sort of closure, not
Yeah,
just for the series, but also for these individual characters.
yeah,
We kind of always knew where Kanan's closure was going to be. I mean,
yeah.
honestly. And I still don't know what that's going to look like for Ezra. We know that Hera survives, and so there's not so much of a need for closure
Right.
for her. But I mean, even with like Sabine has a place to go. Like
Yep.
she's Mandalore and the fight against the Empire there. Like, but
Mm-hmm.
especially for Ezra, I guess. Like, I really need something definitive. I feel like, and
Right.
and to have a show that would come in and be like, oh look, here's the continuing adventures of Ezra and Ahsoka. Like, I would
Right.
enjoy that, but
Oh yeah.
if you're, and I'm not going to complain about it. So this is not assuming by next Thursday that we had that. I'm not gonna, be all whiny about it
Right.
on next week's streamcast. But it would rob Rebels of that moment, I think. And I want Rebels. I feel like Rebels doesn't get enough attention and enough credit for what it's been doing for Star Wars
Right.
already, and I would
Yes.
hate for it to be robbed. So this is going to be a completely different type of analogy here, because I'm going to talk about Star Trek for a second, and I know that's a no-no. But Star Trek Enterprise was a TV show, which was the most recent one before the Star Trek Discovery show that's airing on CBS All Access now. But that show, when it got to the end of it, which these may all be words that you're not familiar with if you've always watched Star Trek and never watched always watched Star Wars and never watched Star Trek. But Star Trek had these things called holodecks, which are like these virtual reality kind of things, and you could run different programs. And at the end of Enterprise, like in the very last episode, Will Riker, who's one of the main characters from Star Trek The Next Generation, like it gives like the assumption that the whole series of Enterprise was a holodeck program that Will Riker was running. And it like really undercut like the whole series of Enterprise by saying, well, Enterprise was cool and all, but look, The Next Generation. And
all right.
Like, and it tied it into a larger thing, which I like, and which is what Star Wars does a lot. But I would hate for Rebels not to get its moment to kind of be important. And I feel like for a lot of people, it's already not important, and I want it to be.
And that I completely agree with, and I so badly want closure for Rebels because we didn't get it for Star Wars The Clone Wars. Like you said, wanting closure for Ezra, which I really want closure for Ezra, but it's because we didn't really get it for Ahsoka. Sure. Like her departure in season 5 was amazing, and I would have been fine with it, but I always wanted the adventures of Ahsoka after that. I knew they might not come in Star Wars The Clone Wars, but I knew they'd come eventually, and the Ahsoka novel by E.K. Johnston is amazing.
Oh, right. It's really good.
And that kind of thing. But I could forgive the Clone Wars because it got canceled, and it didn't get canceled because it wasn't performing well. It got canceled because of the Disney buyout. Like there was just nothing for it. And with Rebels, I want to see the show have a conclusion that's a real conclusion and not a holodeck conclusion or a Newhart is really a dream of Bob Newhart kind of ending. I wanted to have this meaningful ending because to me, Rebels is as part of the saga as any of the films.
I mean, and like, I trust Dave Filoni almost implicitly.
Yes. In Dave we trust.
Yeah. I don't know that I trust Disney's marketing division, though.
Yes.
And I feel like Disney, there may be a tendency there to say, hey, the thing has ended, but here's the next thing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, frick, if you follow us on Twitter, and if you follow me on Twitter specifically also, you saw that I went on a tirade because Disney XD, literally the day the episodes that Kanan died dropped. Like the day they dropped, they released a clip of Kanan dying with it was literally the death of Caleb Doom was the name of the YouTube video.
Right.
I was pissed. I was like, how dare you? Like, it didn't spoil it for me. I stayed off of YouTube until I'd seen the episodes. But there were people who had that moment spoiled for them because they're subscribed to Disney XD on YouTube, but their marketing is like, no, get this out there. This is important. People are going to want to see it. And just that applied on a large scale is frustrating.
But yeah, so we'll know more about all of this, presumably, this time next week.
Yeah.
After Rebels is over, we'll be able to talk about, and it sounds weird to even say that, especially because we were talking before we did our audio commentaries the other day, and I literally didn't realize until Tuesday that Rebel ends next week. I thought we had at least another week. But it's
going to be so much. It's going to be 90 minutes worth of content.
Sure.
Next week. That's crazy.
But so make sure you're listening to those audio commentaries. They're a lot of fun to do.
I've enjoyed myself greatly. We got better at them as we went too, of course.
And one other thing that was going to tie in somehow, and I forget how it was going to tie in. So awkward transition into next topic. So we have purposefully not talked a lot about Solo on the StreamCast and really on our channel because there's almost like there's nothing really concrete yet to talk about with Solo. Um, and we promise we'll give you all the Solo content you can stand
Yep.
someday. We're
Right.
just
Once,
not quite today yet.
once there's real things, there's only so much I can do. What does Kira's outfit in this scene mean? Like, I'm not gonna do that.
But one thing that is, I guess, more concrete is we got some sort of confirmation online of when Solo takes place, and we thought we could talk about that for a few minutes. So it looks like the time frame that we are being given, and I think this is based on some of the tie-in novels. Honestly, I don't remember exactly where this source come from. I just saw it on Facebook of all places, but from a reputable wherever I saw it on Facebook. That's the amount
reputable wherever on Facebook.
That's the amount of prep work I put into this segment. So, but we know that Solo is going to take place either 11 to 14 years before the Battle of Yavin. So before A New Hope, before Rogue One. That even places it at least 5 or 6 years before the beginning of Rebels. So that's where that time frame is going to be. So do you have any specific thoughts about that?
Well, I think how it was going to tie in is we were going to talk about like the interconnectedness, because we were going to talk about like what was going on around this time, but I don't know. It doesn't really matter. I'm excited for this. This is what we were kind of doing in our pre-talk, which our pre-stream meetings are really less pre-stream meetings and more us talking why I make a thumbnail. That's about as official as they get. But we were talking about how there's all of these things that are happening around it. So it's a couple years before Rebels. For reference, I believe Revenge of the Sith is 19 years before the Battle of Yavin, before A New Hope. So it's only a couple years after that. And I think in Legends, at least, Han was supposed to be around 13 or 14 in Revenge of the Sith. He wasn't in Revenge of the Sith, but he would have been around that age. But maybe that could be wrong. I haven't looked that stat up in a while. But I'm shaking my camera. But this feels like there's a lot of big things that have happened on this side of it or that side of it, but nothing has really happened in this time frame. You were going through the timeline list, and it's before the Thrawn novel, which brought Thrawn back into canon. It's before Tarkin, right? Or is it just after Tarkin?
Just after Tarkin.
Okay.
And this would be, assuming that it is toward that more 14 rather than the 11, not that it makes that big of a difference. But the time frame that we have for the beginning of the Rebel Rising novel and that scene with the Ursos at the beginning of Rogue One, that is supposedly 13 years before the Battle of Yavin. But still, some of the stuff that we know about in this time frame is obscure enough that we probably won't see it. At least obscure in like what people would have known at the time. So unless Han Solo just happens to be on the planet that the Ursos were living on, or hanging out on Coruscant, or or palling around with Moff Tarkin, we're probably not going to get a whole lot of direct tie-ins, but there's plenty of room for allusions to things because of the entire time frame between Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope that we have in new canon. This is kind of the portion of it that is the lightest.
And we were talking about how that's kind of refreshing, because I feel like in Legends canon it was kind of this thing where it's like, here's this big gap of years, and here's a year that had 10 books take place in it.
Yeah.
Which year do you think we're going to release a book in?
Right.
Hint, it's not the first one. And it got so convoluted, and no one knew what was going on, and blah, blah, blah. And so this feels like they're kind of like, okay, here's a window. Let's put it there. Which is exciting, but I think we could still see some references. So I don't think it's going to directly tie into Rebels because it's before the series, but there could be a background. It would probably only be Kanan or Hera, but you could see them in a bar in the background or something.
Right. And speaking of Rebels, I think we looked up 11 years before the Battle of Yavin was the A New Dawn novel.
Yep.
So that's right at that window here
Yep.
too. So it's still possible that we could get, and I'm sure because all Star Wars movies have Easter eggs of some sort.
Right.
So I don't imagine that we would be without references altogether.
And I think this is going to be one of the worst offenders. And I don't say that as a bad thing because I'm not against it. But to me, there's no point in making a Han Solo movie except for to have fun and to have nostalgia.
Yeah.
This is not going to offer. This is not going to be Rebels. Here's how the Force works. This is going to be like Han Solo goes on an adventure and becomes Han Solo. And then you're right. He's probably going to shoot first a lot. He's not going to be a fan of odds.
Yeah.
It's going to be a lot of that kind of stuff. And if that's the type of thing that upsets you and that's the type of thing you don't want to watch, you probably shouldn't go see Solo because I don't know how it's going to be anything else.
But yeah, so I know that's not a lot of Solo content.
Right.
We've still got a few more months left before Solo, but it was worth, while we're talking about sort of the larger picture of Star Wars here, it was worth sort of pointing out where this fits into that bigger picture. But we're right around our 45-minute mark again. So we may want to throw it to chat here while we still got some time.
Right.
We've got a lot of people in chat that have been hanging out. But if you've got questions or thoughts, we'll scroll back through and see what you've been talking about. But you can ask us, again, whatever Star Wars stuff you got.
We have Echo 7 of Port Haven, who he wanted to know about closure for characters, but we kind of addressed that.
Right.
He made an interesting comment, though. The use of A New Hope Star Destroyers and TIE Fighters puts Solo closer to A New Hope rather than ROTS, or Revenge of the Sith. That is a very logical argument that I'm not sure the art department on Solo cares a whole lot about.
Yeah.
It's probably what my response to that is. If I had to guess, I think they're going to go, okay, it's more realistic if the Empire has a lot of Republic cruisers instead of Imperial Star Destroyers.
Yeah.
But people are going to get confused and wonder why the Star Destroyers look weird. So we're going to make Imperial ones. Like, right. I guarantee you that's what's going on. And when I say that again, I know I complain about this a lot, and I don't think people believe me. But I have had so many people ask me when Rogue One takes place.
No, I literally had that conversation days ago.
Yeah. And there's so many people who love Star Wars, and I'm super against gatekeeping. And if you love Star Wars, that's enough to be a fan. But there's so many Star Wars fans who go see the movie once, buy the Blu-ray, and never watch it, and then ask me really weird questions.
Yeah. I
had a guy at work ask me who Carrie Fisher plays in The Last Jedi because he didn't realize that it would be an older version of Leia because he also hadn't seen The Force Awakens.
Oh.
So that was a conversation I've had.
Yeah. Mark Hamill is the Joker. That's the character he voices in The Last Jedi.
Yep.
We're getting a lot of requests or a lot of talk about bounty hunters. And Nolan wants to know if we will do a bounty hunter week on our stream chat.
I'm totally fine with it. I think we've just been dominated by Rebels right now.
But once we get a couple of weeks past Rebels, we won't have as much to talk about there. And I feel like we're going to have this gap between the end of Rebels and when Solo really starts to pick up.
And I think a Bounty Hunters Appreciation Week sounds like a really good.
I mean, Bounty Hunters are kind of my jam anyway. So
yeah, there you go.
Rebels, Jedi, Sith, who cares? But I want more fits. More fits.
Speaking of the Clone Wars, I have a soft spot for Cad Bane.
Oh yeah.
He was so cool. He was supposed to be Durg from the 2D animated series.
Yeah.
But Durg was going to be I hope I'm saying that right. but I think he was gonna be too complicated to animate because Cad Bane came in the second season,
Yeah.
and so they came up with him instead. And if you guys are a fan, I see two Bosk fans in the chat. If you're a fan of Bosk, man, you should be watching Star Wars: The Clone Wars.
Yep.
If you're not already, because Bosk was in it quite a bit. He was pretty good. He was voiced by D. Bradley Baker, I believe, who also voiced all the clones.
No. Yeah. Echo 7 again said that we need some bounty hunters in Solo. I almost guarantee you we're gonna get some sort of bounty hunter. Well, there's not been any confirmation of specifics yet.
Yeah.
But when you mentioned Cad Bane a minute ago, the first thing that I thought of was it Celebration this last year, where Dave Filoni showed that clip of Cad Bane and Boba Fett.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
So if you haven't seen this, I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube. But it was like a deleted clip. It was gonna be in the Clone Wars had it continued, and it was unfinished, so it wasn't like fully animated. But Cad Bane shot Boba Fett, and that's where he got the dent in his helmet from, and that was a pretty cool minute.
Oh yeah, that was. I remember watching that, and I freaked out. I remember because I was watching the live stream for Celebration, and they got to see the clip, and I couldn't see the clip, but I could hear the people listening to the clip. And I knew there was a thing at the end that everyone was freaking out about. And Dave was like, that was actually George's idea. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And then the clip got released and I watched it. And I was like, this is what the clip was. And I was freaking out.
But lots of Bosk fans in the chat.
Yeah. Bear of Bare Naked Gaming, which is a great channel, says that D. Bradley Baker is also the voice of Klaus the fish, or is it Claus the fish of American Dad? I don't watch American Dad. He is also the voice of Perry the platypus in Phineas and Ferb.
Now that is a thing I watch.
Yeah, I love me some Phineas and Ferb. It's just that gurgly noise.
There's a lot of Star Wars references in Phineas and Ferb.
There is a lot. Chronicles of Meep is one of the best episodes of all time, but that is not relevant to this podcast at all.
We'll do a Phineas and Ferb week too.
Yeah, well, there is a Phineas and Ferb special. But yeah.
But yeah, if you have other thoughts about things we should do on some of these weeks where we don't have big topics, you can let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the comments to this or any of our other videos.
Yeah, it's a year and a half until episode 9. Obviously, leading up to episode 9, we're going to have things to say, but there's going to be like a good solid year of time where we're going to have like 50-ish streams, and we'll need ideas. So
yeah, make sure
don't think we're ignoring you if we haven't gotten to it yet. It's just a timing thing.
Yeah, and we're going to have lots of time to talk about all the things you want us to talk about. But I'm going to give chat one more minute to sort of throw out a question if they've got it.
If not, or just a comment in general.
Yeah.
Also, I will say I got a couple of friends here, Bare Naked Gaming, McYagi, Beeman Entertainment from earlier, who all make their own YouTube stuff. So while you're waiting around, if you guys want to check them out, if you're lurking and you are in the YouTube Wolfpack, you should give a howl so people can know. Speaking of the YouTube Wolfpack, the Couch Bum just showed up, just in time. CB, before we end, do you have any Star Wars question? Because we're about done.
Yeah, and while we're letting him catch up in the delay, you want to shout out again Echo 7, our pal from our forums, who's always here.
Yes.
And then our pal Rebecca showed up a little while ago also. So
yep.
If you're not on the Port Haven forums, we got a good community there too. What is a Star War?
That's a great question.
Well, it's when one star fights another star.
Yep. It's when two stars hate each other very much. Yep. And they fight. Yep. Nolan wants all about the regular people and how they get by. That's not a question or even really a comment, Nolan. It's just a general incomplete sentence.
I mean, if we get down to it, Wikipedia has an article about the menu in Dex's Diner, and I could do 45 minutes on the menu at Dex's Diner. So
Actually,
Oof.
my favorite Wikipedia article is pants. There's an article on pants. The best article they
There
have.
you go. All right. Well, it looks like that's what chat has for us today.
Yep.
And so we've had a lot of fun. Again, I love doing these streamcasts. And I hope that you all have fun hanging out with us. If you're not watching it live, if you're watching the VOD later on, we do try to do these every Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. That's Eastern
Yep.
Time in the U.S. So hopefully you can find us there. But make sure you're checking out all of our other stuff. Yoda Bauer's done a lot of videos this week on our channel. So she's got 2 videos that she did on Rebels and how Rebels might tie in with the Last Jedi that you should check out. We got our Rebels audio commentaries that are up.
Yep.
There's all sorts of stuff going on. You can find us on Twitter. We're on Facebook. We've got our blog site. We've got our forums. We are in all the places, and we want to be your Star Wars refuge online. So make sure you are finding us. We're everywhere.
All over the places.
And we have access now to all space and time. So
yeah, right. Yeah, I think that's what I have. I am so excited and yet not excited for next week. So next week, in fairness, I know not everyone here in the chat watches Rebels, and I'm sorry, but we're going to be talking about the Rebels series finale next week because 4 years of my life is wrapping up, and we're going to need to decompress about it.
Yeah. And maybe next week we'll have a sign off. But
maybe. Yeah, right. We've never really come up. I just feel weird using my vlog one here. I don't know why.
Yeah.
May the Cheez-Its be with you. How about that?
There you go. And Cheez-Its we trust.
And Cheez-Its we trust.
Bye, guys.
Later.